all. I have Brisc and Maccloud with me and a few others lurking in the channel, which is totally fine. These are public, so if you want to hang out with us and listen to us live, you can jump in the on-air channel on Talking in Stations Discord. Today, we're going to be looking at CSM minutes, and this is from the February summit. I think that's considered the winter summit. It's hard to say because, you know, it's Iceland and it's always winter. We're going to read some of it to you. We're going to talk to Brisc about some of the stuff that was divulged there. And we want to get your thoughts as well. If you guys have something you want to say, go ahead and say it in chat. For those that are listening to us or will listen to us later on, you know, you can write comments in YouTube and stuff like that. Okay, Brisc. Let me ask you, you were there. What was it like before all this meeting started?
I think we were all in pretty good spirits. We had Saturday night. They always try to do a team builder for the CSM and for CCP before we start the summit proper. Last year we did a fishing trip, and this time
the fishing trip.
The famous fishing trip where Aerith and Jintan spent the whole time puking off the side of the boat. It's pretty funny. But I think this time around, instead, we just went to the bar that's downstairs at CCP and made an open bar and just sat around and talked to everybody. And we got to meet a lot of the new folks that have been hired on. And that was one of the things we alluded to in the leadership, in the summit welcome and the leadership team minutes that we'll read in a minute here about a lot of new faces and getting to meet new people, which was kind of cool. So we were very upbeat until, you know, the guard thing. So.
Yeah, so you guys are hanging out and the meeting starts. When did you guys get together your 4 points that you were going to push on? The capitals, the attributes, the insurance, the monetization.
We had gone out to dinner, I think, the night before, and with just basically us, and had sat around and came up with those 4 things.
Can you describe what these actually are? Because it's a little bit vague. Capitals, for instance.
Well, first, capital was capital balance, and we already knew that was going to be discussed, but that was our #1 push. After getting the Wardeck stuff done last time, we felt like this was the most important thing we needed to do, was talk about capital balance, because that was whatever I think was on everybody's mind. That was the next thing that needed to get touched. Attributes we talked about was getting rid of the attribute system. We discussed that briefly last time, but we wanted to make it more clear that we think it's ripe now. Time is ripe now to get rid of that old legacy system and come up with something different. And there were different things we talked about in regards to that, but that was mainly a new player retention kind of thing. And then insurance, that was just the fact that insurance as a faucet is too high, and it makes, especially on the capital side with faxes and dreads, it makes them too disposable. And we feel like there needs to be more of a pinch when you lose a capital ship, instead of just using these things as throwaways. Plus, there's also a number of hulls specifically that folks can mine ore, build the hull, insurance it, and then insurance fraud it and make a profit. And we wanted to see that ended because it's too easy to monetize minerals at that point. And then monetization was just, we're always watching them to make sure they don't do stupid shit with monetization. And I think, especially after the Pearl Abyss acquisition and everybody in the community being nervous about what that's going to mean, I think monetization has been a pretty important thing for us. And plus, that also includes all the stuff we always ask for, like alliance skins and corpse skins and stuff like that. So that's where the fork came from.
Okay, so insurance fraud, for people that don't know, is the amount that's paid out by Platinum Insurance, which is the highest ranking insurance that you can buy. I believe all insurance is calculated on something like a 3-month grouping of how much the ship was worth.
Right.
And so what happens is when a ship goes down in value for whatever reason, if it's used less or anything, then you can take the ship and actually just destroy it, and the insurance will actually be more than the ship was worth. And so you're creating money out of nothing. And that's happened a few times. It usually happens with big, bulky ships like battleships and freighters, and because they take a lot of minerals, and so the mineral cost will suddenly drop, and so the ship costs a lot less to build, and as you build it, you destroy it, and the insurance was 3 months ago rates, which are higher, and then that pays you back. So okay, that's what that is. All right. Hey Artemis, thanks for joining us. We're going to hang out and talk about CSM minutes and stuff. So
yeah,
do you have something that you want to talk about in CSM, or are you just kind of hanging out?
I was just hanging out, but something came to mind based on our discussion of these 4 points, and that is looking back to the previous minutes. We had also 4 points, which the CSM brought up. And to remind those who don't remember, they were server stability, war declarations, Devs Play Eve, and the bounty system. Now, all 4 of those have changed coming into this summit. So my question is follow up from those 4 points, right? They were brought up, they were discussed during the summit. Time has passed since then. Are we satisfied with whatever has been done regarding those 4 points? Is there anything we can say regarding what happened based on the things that were brought up at last summit to now at this summit, such that those 4 things aren't needing to be readdressed?
Well, I'd say that is, at least in regards to server stability, the last summit we had just come off of UALX and I-47, so everybody was kind of like freaking out about the fact that in these big massive fleet fights, the servers kept crapping out. And in the immediate period around that, CCP did a lot of work to upgrade servers, provide fixes to things that we had asked for. And I think because there have not been as many big fleet fights in the last 6 months, that became a lower priority item for us. But it's still something we're going to keep an eye on, and it's something we're going to yell about the next fight if bad things still happen. So I think that was part of the issue, at least there. The fact that it wasn't front of mind because we hadn't had any big fights. The Wardex, that's getting resolved, so we didn't have to put that on there. I think we're all pretty happy that they looked into that last time, and that we're coming up on the final portions of that revamp in the next couple months. Devs playing the game. We just want to make it clear we wanted the devs to play the game, and we got assurances that was happening. So that kind of was one of those things we wanted to bring up. But I feel like at least we got our message across, and that's what we needed to do. And then the last one was bounty system. That one I think was tied into server stability, and the biggest issue we had with the bounty system was that it was screwing up a lot, creating a lot of server calls in these big fights that weren't necessary. I think it's still a priority, but given that we haven't had these big fights and stability of the servers hasn't been as big a deal in the last 6 months, I think that kind of dropped in priority terms. But that's something I still want them to tear it out. It's just, I think attributes became the new bounty system feature of things we want to see removed from legacy code that don't really add anything to the game anymore, that can be taken away without any real pain or pressure.
All right. So those were the 4 of last summit. This summit, it's capitals, attributes, insurance, and monetization. And you guys were generally satisfied with your priorities being addressed last year. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
They're listening. We're happy to see that.
Well, let's see. So in this first part, it's basically a summary. It's a summit welcome session, and CCP Guard says, "Yeah, I've already taken a job somewhere else." And what's the reaction in the room?
We thought they were kidding. We thought it was a joke, because this would be like the second summit in a row where something massive has been dropped on us when we get there, and I feel like the Pearl Abyss sale was last time, and then this time would be Guard leaving. And I think we were all just looking around kind of stunned, because I think pretty much everybody was on the assumption that Guard was a lifer and he was going to be CEO someday, because he's just going to be the last one there at the very end. So we were all pretty sad to see him go, and I think we were all kind of stunned by that. So it kind of put a damper on the first day, knowing he was leaving.
Mm-hmm. All right, yeah, it seems like the Jintan's like, oh, this is going to send shockwaves through CCP, and if you don't have a replacement, it's going to send a bad message and all this other stuff. And I wonder if you, I wonder if that is overstated, or if CCP Guard really is the face of of EVE Online and that sort of thing. He's done a lot of videos. He's been the host of all their programs. He's very much been visible at meetups, and then of course he does a lot of the side gags and funny stuff that goes on.
And permaban. Don't forget about like the most important thing he does.
I was gonna say, like, you know, from a marketing perspective, like, perception is reality, and the perception is that CCP Guard was the face of CCP. So,
Well, I may be the only guy in the world that wants to push back on this a little bit. I love Guard. I think, again, he's a magical creature, but I take EVE more seriously than a lot of the gags and fun stuff that goes along with it. So I kind of found it a little distracting. It was almost, of course, really, this shouldn't even be said, but I'll say it anyway. It's like EVE to me seems like a more, you want to take it a little more seriously than introducing a generational kind of branding.
Are you trying to say that like EVE is like running EVE and running CCP as a team job, and it's not just done by one person?
Well, it's not just imaged. It's not just like I think early on, I mean, some of the stuff that attracted me to EVE Online was very much the darker stuff, like betrayals and drama, and it was Game of Thrones in space kind of stuff, right? And then you introduce kind of like, you know, rap rock star, the what is it? The strongman wrestling out of Iceland, the games where people are slipping around. You know, it's kind of like introducing pop culture into this thing that I believe is.
I think you're muddling things a bit. Like, so there's there's a distinction I want to make between taking EVE seriously and EVE players taking themselves seriously, and even CCP devs taking themselves seriously. So like the permaban thing to me is not saying CCP isn't taking EVE seriously or is making EVE funny. It is that CCP doesn't take themselves too seriously. So they can be funny. They cannot have to be this super serious space drama, whatever. They can have personality to them. Similar with the CCP games thing. It's like we're all super nerds here to nerd out at this nerd convention, but we're not going to take ourselves too seriously, even though it's very clear we're taking EVE very seriously because we're all nerds at this nerd convention for EVE.
Is it very clear?
That's the way it appears to me.
Is it very clear that devs are taking the game seriously? Like, not just the game, but because the mechanics, yeah, they take that seriously. It's work, whatever. Talking about, are they taking the game for its appeal of, as Zenuria says, I think that's Zenuria, Game of Thrones versus House of Cards. Like, are they taking that part seriously? Doesn't seem like they are. It seems like all the community stuff is just kind of like, let's get wasted, let's have some fun, let's be funny, let's make some music, let's be friends. That's to me what the whole community team is kind of projects. And that might be appropriate for, I think it's appropriate for like almost a certain generation. But I'm not in that generation. I'm an older person, so I like dark wave music. You know,
it depends entirely on like how you think a company should be run. Whether you think a company should actually have like a character, or and like, you know, sort of a sense of like family, a sense of kind of like, you know, something being something other than just a corporate machine. And that's kind of what I think, you know, why I think sort of you know, why the kind of whole permaban thing was sort of greenlit was, you know, CCP wanted to differentiate themselves from, soulless sort of, companies like EA, for example, that were just basically churning out bullshit.
Yeah.
So they wanted to show that they're not a soulless entity that just wants to churn out stuff and monetize stuff and make money. They wanted to show that they are part of the community. They wanted to be integrated with the community. And so, something like Permaband is a great way of showcasing the fact that, they enjoy themselves and they enjoy what they're doing, and they enjoy, basically interfacing with their community and, sort of producing something that has absolutely no, actual like literal impact on the game, as you say it, but has an impact on the community, because then it shows that, like, it's not just all greed, it's actually community development, it's community enrichment.
I want to take a hardline stance directly opposed to your vision for Eve there, Matterall. Like the whole Eve is Game of Thrones plus House of Cards thing.
Well, that was Zenuria's.
Because,
but yeah.
But it seems
I'll endorse it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So Eve, in my opinion, is a sandbox, right? That is what Eve is, which means that the player base could certainly make it a Game of Thrones plus House of Cards space opera. They could also make it a very silly place. They could also make it a very dark and cold and harsh place with no politics, no metagame, what have you. And CCP's roles in that, as they've mentioned in the past, and what I think their role should be, is the janitor, right? They keep things clean, they make sure everything runs smoothly, but they don't interfere too much. That's the ideal world, in my opinion. Not maintaining some space opera, not maintaining some fun time like adventure theme park, what have you, more on the WoW side of the spectrum.
Not space opera. I take offense to that. We're talking science fiction. There's a difference. But I know what you mean. I like space opera too, by the way. But science fiction, but I don't know, 15 years, can you constantly be like brooding? At some point, you gotta snap out of it. So I think they did. Well, anyway, whatever. The community team is trying to bond with players, and who knows if it worked or didn't work, because we're all still here, so something's going right. Anyway, let's get on with the summit. I'm looking at the table of contents real quick. We have they introduced the leadership team. They talk about ships and module balance. They talk about war declarations. They talk about the EVE Online launcher, Portal 2.0, which is basically a mobile app for EVE. If it's a 2.0, they're probably redoing it. They talk about EVE culture and in-game identity, which is kind of interesting. They talk about skills on demand. They talk about Q1, Q2 marketing plan, capital balance, structures, economy / ISK generation and mining. They also discuss art of EVE Online, monetization, the new Ninja team area of focus, login campaigns. See what that's about. They talk finally wrap up with EVE Online World Tour, EVE Online via VFX. The Partners Program, the CCP Partners Program, where they basically partner with people like us or other content creators, players. And then the new web store and in-game PLEX marketplace. And then the summit closes. So those are the table of contents. We'll just take them in order and try to move through them really quickly. The leadership team, was there any surprises there? We know that the executive producer role has been changed to 3 different people. Essentially, 2 of them are art-based and 1 is a marketing person. So that's who's running CCP's pathway now.
The only thing in there that I would point out is, we're still asking for a roadmap, and I'm hoping that they'll release one. It's frustrating when players don't see where the company wants to go with the game, and it creates this narrative that there's no vision. And there obviously is one, because these guys have something they're trying to implement. So trying to get them to put that out and make it more public. Hopefully they do that at Amsterdam, but I haven't seen any I haven't seen the keynote or anything yet, so I don't know what they're going to say.
Yeah, I saw that you were the one asking for that. Like, you know, can you put out a roadmap? People need something to like have hope in and stuff like that.
Yeah, they got to do that.
Okay, so ship and module balance. Now we've already seen a lot of this. Again, these notes go back to February, so we've already seen a lot of the changes that have come through here. Is there anything about this section that didn't make it into the changes that have been proposed for April? And let me put that timeline together real quick. These discussions were held in February. We're now in March. The changes that are coming have been announced through a dev blog, and those changes won't hit the game until April. So these changes are not in the game yet that are proposed. And they are just proposed. They're open for public scrutiny and conversation inside the e-forums. Go ahead, Bruce.
No, I'm saying basically, I think, you know, we threw a bunch of stuff out at these guys, and you know, so one of the things I want to mention on the, you know, because it's something that I feel like players don't understand, or at least they assume. Everything we tell CCP, this isn't stuff they don't know. They're aware of all of these issues. They know that these ships have problems. Rise has forgotten more about stuff than anybody there except maybe Satonia. So they know what ships kind of need an issue, have problems, or where they're feeling it. They're just trying to get feedback from us on what we're hearing from the community, and to see if what they see and what we see are aligned. And there are some times where they see things or want to try things that are different from what we suggest. For example, the Ferox nerfs that are included in the April game change. It's not what we asked for. We asked for something that would reduce the optimal range because it's too long. And that didn't make it in there, but they made other changes to the Ferox. Okay, we'll see if they work. But you know, there's some of these situations where we ask for things that they don't want to give us, or that they're looking at something from a different perspective, and there's a lot of back and forth. Hopefully, you know, we'll see some movement on some of these things, and I think a lot of it is really just trying to get sentiment. So. Rise and these guys, they know what needs to get fixed. It's just a question of priority and whether they think they want to make those types of changes to the meta.
Sometimes it's sometimes people wonder whether CCP kind of gets it right in terms of realizing the actual cause of the issue, whereas, you know, as opposed to just basically dealing with the symptoms that, you know, that cause kind of, you know, seems to present itself as.
All right, so these balance changes, one of the things that struck me is, I think it was Sort Dragon, who I often disagree with, says that the game doesn't need big features right now, it just needs balance, or fixing the features. Is that accurate? You remember him?
Is that what it says in the minutes?
Yeah, I think it said
I see. Yeah. I think one of the things that we go back and forth on, and one of the jokes we had was that everything old is new again, and we'll go through cycles in the game where people want new expansions, they want new features, they want new stuff because everything seems kind of stale, and then they'll start working on those types of things, and then the community starts bitching. No, we don't care about that stuff. We don't want Abyssal Dead Space. We don't want this. We want bug fixes. We want fix the game already. Balance the ships, do tier aside, and then CCP says okay, and then they go back and do that, and then the cycle, you know, repeats itself. So I feel like it's important for them to chew gum and walk at the same time, which means they should be working on new stuff as well as fixing old things.
Well, I just want to caution the CSM of thinking that all the people that complain about something that's in front of them outweighs people who can't imagine what they actually want. In other words, they're not going to complain about something they haven't thought about yet, right? Because it's not in front of them and they don't have any reference to it. So basically, new expansions can't be endorsed because they haven't been envisioned yet. But people can always complain about stuff that's in front of them. And so I think you ought to like take into consideration that even though a lot of people are complaining about balance and all that crap, this game still has to produce tent poles that hold the circus together, and we need like you know, we need expansions, we need new imaginative gameplay, and we need to basically really find new ways of competing with one another in a science fiction platform. So I always get upset when I hear the CSM saying, well, balance, balance, balance. No, we don't need new features. We need to make the old features work. I'm like, dude, some of those old features are old and they've already been conquered by people. And I want to compete on a level playing field. So I need new material that I can try to conquer as a new player, for instance, instead of trying to compete with people who already mastered that old shit. Okay, moving on. So there's module and balance. I don't think there's more there. I mean, I haven't looked at it actually very closely, but I will move on to war declarations. This actually, this got dealt with, right?
How do you mean by dealt with?
Well, there are proposed war declaration changes that had already been started, and every month this spring, so basically February and March and April as well, there will be war declaration changes.
I think what you mean by that is that has this already been dealt with? Has this already been announced? Yes. Everything that's in here, as far as I know, was put out in the War Deck blog that they did right after the summit that explained where they were going for the next couple months. So I think all of that is already in there. So hopefully people have seen that. But essentially, it's just focusing on structures. Neutral logi will get you concorded, stuff like that. That's all really been announced already.
Okay. War declarations. So, but if you want to see how people thought about it and worked it out, you can read that chapter. The EVE Online launcher was something that's already here. And this section has when they were talking about it there. I seem to remember, was there anything to talk about here on the EVE launcher, EVE Online launcher, that we haven't seen already?
I think, no, I think mainly it's just that, you know, we had a couple things that we were looking for that we still want them to do with the launcher down the road. And that we're pleased with the way that things went. There was some complaining about, oh my God, there's reread this and reread that, and oh, there's too many ads and other stuff like that. And basically, we just wanted to tell Cemetery and Avalon and the guys that were working on this that they did a good job, because it is great. It's compared to what we've had in the launcher and before. It's much better, and they're still iterating on it, and that's good. So
I agree. It's a better launcher for sure.
Way better than it was before.
Yeah. And it looks like it has room to expand, but I like its stability. It's so much better.
Specifically on that room to expand point, there's a discussion between Merkelchen and CCP Cemetery and the judge about like potential features to be added to the launcher. And CCP Cemetery says that they like the ideas, but they're definitely looking for more feedback and more requests, because right now a lot of the suggestions, they only appeal to power players. And so like there could be some concern about how that would, he doesn't specifically mention this, so mention why it is a concern that it only appeals to power players. So my thought is that if it only appeals to power players, then it's just added complexity for the casual player that could push them away from the game. But basically he's like, yeah, the road is open for expansion for new ideas, so please bring in that that suggestion and feedback.
I think basically one of the things that Merck had asked about was he uses IS Boxer when he's using multiple clients, and I think we're kind of hoping that maybe we can see some of that functionality added to the launcher, so you don't have to use a third-party app, especially the throwing up of different sized windows in different areas on your screens that is remembered by the launcher, so you don't have to redo that every time. Things like that, I think, is what he was talking about.
Yeah, another third-party program that does that pretty well is Eve Preview.
Okay, so they move on to Eve Portal 2.0, and that looks like it's a new app, right? They have new people building it.
They brought it in-house. So these are CCP devs in Shanghai that are working on this, as I understand it, which is good.
This section is completely redacted. I guess they're going to like...
They showed us a bunch of mock-ups. They showed us a bunch of stuff that had not been, that was not ready for prime time. So they redacted all the discussion that we had about it. Hopefully they will do a longer thing of this in the future.
Is it your sense?
Because I think if they do it right, it'll...
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm done. Go ahead.
Is it your sense that they understand what we want to see in an app?
I think they get it. I think they understand what we're looking for. And I mean, you know, it's the things that you constantly hear when I talk to folks in the community. What do they want from an app? They want to be able to do some limited in-game stuff on the app. They want to be able to do PI on the app. They want to be able to do market stuff on the app and contracts and checking their wallets and doing their skill trees and things along those lines. And I think CCP understands that. I think the question is just trying to get it so that this integrates with the client in a way that works. But a lot of that stuff is back-end stuff that Steve would know better than I do. But I mean, I think they understand what we want. It's just trying to find a way to give it to us.
You need those daily logins, though. And if you export a lot of these housekeeping tasks that you have to do in Eve to something they can do without getting into the client, doesn't that threaten PCU numbers and overall awareness of what's around you in the game? I mean, we already get depressed when the numbers are like 30,000. It used to be 60,000, and everybody gets all...
True. I mean, but the thing is, you know, I think a lot of guys want to be able to do like Eve maintenance type stuff on the toilet. You know, they don't want to have to. They don't want to have to log in to do something boring, or be able to log in when they're at work or something. They're not in front of their PC. Providing them a way to do that, I think, is not. It's probably not going to hurt, you know, numbers.
Like moving my extractors around in planetary interaction, I don't need to have a full fat Eve client to do that. Like in my personal opinion.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting? I read
right back.
I read a review that somebody was playing what's that game, Skyrim, and they're like, I couldn't get into it on on my computer, and then I played it on PS4, and I couldn't really get into it there either. I mean, I loved it; it was great, but I couldn't quite get into it. Then they played it on Switch, and they said that was the difference. I needed to be able to carry that world around me. Instead of me coming to the world came with me. And that might be interesting for these kinds of tasks, you know, like to take them around with you and stuff. So if you're sitting in a doctor's office waiting or whatever, you can actually visit EVE Online. I think that's the power of mobile gaming, right? That's the power of mobile gaming. It's like, yeah, I got a moment. Let me look at this.
Well, one of the you know, one of the games that took mobile gaming, like, you know, by an absolute storm was Pokemon Go, and that was kind of like, that was augmented reality sort of gaming, but it was gaming on the go as well. I was kind of thinking, like, how could you do a augmented reality kind of game for EVE Online? And then I was like, yeah, you couldn't do it with PI because that would mean that you'd have to actually go around the globe in order to actually do it.
All right, so
anyway,
Portal 2.0. It's a new app coming for EVE Online at some point. I think that, Artemis, I'd like to have your thoughts on this. I think what you want to do with a client is you want to be able to receive and give EVE mail, and you want to be able to see the calendar. I think those are pretty basic. Everybody says skill tracker, but for experienced players, skills no longer, when you get enough skills, you're not really looking to see when something's going to be available to you. But I guess for newer players, that's a big, big deal.
Or older players who are adding new accounts.
Right, and building them up.
Everybody should have to wake up at 3 a.m. to change skills.
But
they can't do it on their phone. They have to actually start up their massive computer to do it.
The way it used to be, right? Yeah, when we all...
The way it used to be.
Yeah.
None of the SSD stuff.
They-
People,
you-
you have
you
it has to
remember-
install on a hard disk drive.
when they took away routine tasks like logging in to change your skills, when they took that need away with this skill queue that you could program first for 24 hours and then for infinity, or 1 year, I think it is, they took away a lot of people who would log in as a routine. And I'm a big believer that habit is 80% of the effort. So if you can build a habit.
They tried to reintroduce that with dailies, but it didn't really work.
No, because now you were at a deficit. And it felt like you were always falling behind, and that burnt people out because they had to wrestle with that. It's like, it's such a small gift, but I can't let it just evaporate. I need to do, so it was a mental struggle that was more painful. But anyway, so those are the things I was thinking. And I think Artemis raises a good point. Players who are raising alts need to basically skill them up and be on top of that. And when you're a new player, you're changing the skills that you're training a lot quicker because you're getting through them faster. When you're an older player, it takes like 4 weeks to get through a skill.
I think the request being made regarding skill queues is more like sort of what Evemon does, where you can just, if you have some downtime, fiddle around with a plan. Like think, well, what could I do with this alt in a month? Maybe I want it to be a miner. Maybe I want it to be a ratter. Maybe I should throw it into a fax alt. Ooh, but a dread is pretty close. Maybe I could get into a dread sooner. Mm-hmm. It's that sort of thing that you could, like what Evemon does, but on your phone and integrated with Eve, I think is what people are requesting.
Well, not
and
Evemon,
maybe it would be nice to set that straight into your skill queue. Maybe we keep that like currently is, where you just do a copy paste from whatever app that is, be it the Eve app or Evemon, into the in-game client.
Yeah.
Whatever.
I totally agree. The planning can be exported out, I think, because we do that out, away from the client anyway. But the planning, if you can move that out, would work. And I think if you're meandering through the ship tree, I don't know if they still call it the ship tree or whatever, and you're able to to look around and see what you're close to achieving, that's a great use for spare time on a mobile app where you're not in the game anyway, and that kind of stuff. The planning. Okay. Did we get Brisc back, or is he gone? Assume he's gone. Eve culture and identity struck me. Did anybody think CCP Ghost was gone? Because he's definitely there.
He's definitely kept his head like below the parapet as such. Like,
well, he just hasn't been as public, I guess. But maybe with this world tour, he'll reemerge. But he's still in there talking about. In this section, they actually talk about what keeps players attached to the game and stuff like that. This is all very interesting if you're worried about or concerned about the health of the game, and
what about CCP not giving a shit?
How to introduce your friends to it to get them to stick. But there's other stuff in here that happens too. Like Jintan says, alliances don't have taxes, for instance. What I like about this section is they talk about what the core group is, what the binding element of a group is. Is it a corporation? Is it an alliance? And all this kind of stuff. So they kind of explore that here. And I have my own opinions about this, but what do you guys think about corporations versus alliances and stuff?
I think it depends on the group. I think I've got an image of myself as a member of Init, but I also have an image of myself as a member of SDK because we've been around a long time and we've got our own internal corp culture. But alliances have cultures too. So I guess it kind of depends on. I guess it depends on the person. What they view as being the most important aspect of their identity.
Well, in Wormholes, it's all about the corporation. The alliance is just kind of doesn't really count.
As much as Google Plus was a failure, I think one thing it had right was its circles thing. Mm-hmm. I think that alliances and corporations and what have you, even like chat channels, like because people, I'm a member of a number of chat channels and in the past they were more popular, but a group of guys who all did a particular gameplay style would hang out in a chat channel. Like I used to have one called Faz and Friends. Faz was a system in low-sec Galente space, and it's just people who lived around that area, who were relatively friendly with each other, would shout intel into that channel of targets they could go and hunt, or things that they were doing at the time if anybody wanted to join in. So I think of those as sort of social circles, and having all the people in that social circle, be it surrounded by a gameplay mechanic or just people with a similar mindset or play style, in a corporation or in an alliance can be helpful, but not necessary. Like the SIGs, for example, are a fantastic example of where you have people in an alliance or people in a coalition who aren't even in the same corporation. They may not even be in the same alliance, but they all have the same thing that brings them into this social circle, which is whatever that SIG is surrounded by. What I'm trying to say here is I think that we're focusing too much on corps and alliances because they're in-game structures. I think we need to focus more on what is bringing these social circles together. Why are the players conglomerating together and doing things together?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is a social cycle thing. Like, corps and alliances are just basically just a construct, like a method to like artificially develop a social circle.
I just feel like you don't really attract. They seem very poor at attracting the players that want to play together. I'm always in corps where I'm thinking I like half the guys and I don't like the other half. But look at like something organic, like talking in stations. How do you account for that? People are here because they want to be here. And some people really like it, and some people just kind of want to hang out and get a little bit of the benefit. Like there's a whole not a ratio, but array of types of people that are attached to this group, for instance. Some people are hardcore and really all about it, and some people only check in on it.
Well, the thing with talking in stations is, like, you know, people in talking in stations are not here or not promoting talking in stations because, you know, they want to be, they feel like, you know, more people in talking in stations means less chance that they're going to get shot when talking in station goes on a fleet.
Yeah.
Because we don't go on a fleet. So, you know, it's the case of like, you know, you're not recruiting for bodies. You're not recruiting for, you know, more power in your fleet kind of thing. You're here because you want to be here.
So this is funny. Arth brings something up that I agree with. And he says, basically, one of the things is that Z Killboard used to gauge activity. Well, the overall point that he makes is there any information on small groups versus, you know, small corporations or small alliances versus big groups that have thousands of people? How much people stick around. And he says that the corp search is kind of rough and could use some help. But here's the key for me. He says Z Killboard used to gauge activity to rate corporations. And I noticed that too. And that only really helps PvP corporations. And I noticed that too. So actually at Talking in Stations, we have a programmer. He and I are working on putting together a corporate profile. And a lot of the information, a lot of it will be, we'll look at kill boards, but we'll look at other stuff too. And then we'll put in some manual judgment stuff about, you know, what we think the cultural environment is for that corporation. And we want to publish that on Talking in Stations in the future. But that's one of the like tools that we want to develop. When people are looking for a corporation, I don't think there's really a good way to look for a corporation. So what we wanted to do is be the player translators for that sort of thing. And that's one of the things that we were working on. Okay. Anything else in this section?
Regarding a gauge for player activity and Z-Kill being that for PvP Corps, I feel like this is exactly what the activity tracker is supposed to be. It's just missing a centralized and public leaderboard.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. And I think skills can come out of that tree as well. I think Jintan and I had a discussion about it. He said, no, you'd make everybody grind for the skills that they want to do. But I like the Skyrim model where what you do is what you get better at. Although I'm sure that has problems.
It has botting problems.
Botting problems, yeah. So Don
and the
said,
fact
then again,
that I
you
hop
know,
everywhere.
it's not like it's, you know, but then again, you know, the naysayers out there would say that, you know, well, Eve doesn't, what Eve doesn't have a botting problem anyway. Like, so, you
Well,
know,
it's about money though, not about skills.
exactly.
You just compound the problem. Yeah, point taken. So Don here says in chat that Suetonia is on point, and I'm trying to see where Suetonia talks, and I only see that one point where he says brings up agency and fleet finder, and he thinks that a public fleet finder could help form tribes. I'm all for public fleets and anything you can do to help those. That's why I was sad to see voice go, because I honestly thought that it didn't require for you to do all this work. Discord is kind of replacing it. It's true. But one thing about eVoices, you're in the client, you don't need anything else, and you can hear other people, so you can actually fly in a fleet with them. Without voice comms, you can't really fly in a fleet.
Yeah, it does make mass tests and stuff a little bit more awkward as well.
Yeah. Hi, Tuzy, you there in the chat. Okay, so skills on demand.
I did want to say with that kind of like corporation kind of thing that you're working on, Metal, like, let me know, like, you know, hook me up, dude.
What?
That corporation thing that you're working with, that you're working on. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, we're trying to find data points, right? We're looking around. We're saying, what are good data points that we can incorporate? So a lot of it can be automated because it can't just be subjective. And then
some of it has to be, but like there's ways of curtailing subjectiveness into something that's doable.
Well, EVE Online used to be a place where you had corporate historians, and they would actually write out in forums, right, like all the deeds that a corporation had done. And so you could go back in time and look up a corporation like Reikoku, right, who was a part of Bob and later PL, and you could see all their early accomplishments. And they wrote really small things compared to what is considered news nowadays. But those small things were very interesting because they were formative. And so the idea is to say that our Reikoku had a culture, that people would not know about it if they didn't read something. And so that's what we were thinking of doing, is trying to find a way to give corporations culture. Not the culture that they want, but the culture that we see from the outside. So it would be very subjective. And to bolster that, we definitely would need, like, you know, killboard counts and stuff like that. All right, Tuzy is saying that he warned us about something a few weeks ago, and that thing is happening. So I don't know if he can get on here to explain it, but...
oh no, this is...
Guys, I'm going to have to drop for a little bit. I got a conference call, but I should be back in half an hour.
All right. Tell the president hello and then come back. The moon goo manipulation is happening. Okay. I think that was a few episodes ago where Tuzy dropped in and talked about moon goo. It's a very interesting episode, actually. And this was it was a free chat like this one. But definitely something's going on with the financial market because stuff's going nuts, especially with PLEX.
I believe he said that Aerith has been manipulating the moon goo market. For a time, he was raising the price, then he stopped raising the price dropped, and then he was artificially keeping the price down. And recently, he decided to stop artificially holding the price down, so it is expected the price to start rising. If my memory serves, that is what Tuzy is referring to. Yes. So we should be seeing the moon goo price rising.
Right. I think Dunk disagreed with him, he says here. So we'll see. Okay. And that's very interesting. So keep your eyes on the market there. And moon goo is about to do some flips. All right, we're on skills on demand. That was something that was already introduced, and they did a 30% markup on skills you could buy without the skill book. So wherever you were, Wormhole or somewhere far away from a market, you didn't need to travel there to buy a book anymore. You could stay where you were and just buy the skill off your skill queue. Quarter 1 and quarter 2 marketing. I don't remember reading this part. Let me have a quick look. Short Dragon just does skills in demand. The upcoming expansion will feature. Oh, okay. So they actually say out loud there's an upcoming expansion, which they haven't announced that there's going to be an expansion. I imagine this weekend at Amsterdam there will be announcements. They'll probably talk about this expansion, maybe give it a name, talk about the content that's going to be in it. But up until these notes came out, we didn't know there was an official expansion. So cat's out of the bag.
Yay! We can be excited about something fairly new-ish.
Yeah. So this is an interesting area. The marketing plan for EVE Online, again, for people who are interested in how EVE is taking form and how it's recruiting new players to play it and stuff like that. It's always interesting to read that because you want this game to be alive and thriving, and you want the world of possibilities to be bigger and bigger as more players come into the game. So that's why these sections are actually important to players, even though they're not really about the game. They're about how the game is perceived outside of the game. A Noisy Gamer called it a May expansion, but we'll see if it's in May. We don't really know what month it's going to be, or do we? I don't think so. So they talk about streamers here and how people, again, perceive the game. And so check that out. That's got some interesting stuff in it.
We won't have any interest in that, will we?
What's that?
We won't have any interest in that, will we?
I do, but I feel like that's not really what people are tuning in to hear about. They kind of want to know, like, what's the pathway? What are people going to do? So maybe we'll just jump to capital changes here, although capital changes were actually released recently. They're in the April balance pass that's coming. And you can read that. It's I think I already put it inside of our chat, but I'll put it there again. Yep, it's called the Spring Balance Update. And that's where they talk about how they're going to change capitals. And that's part of it, right? There's more changes than just the capitals. There's subcapital changes as well. But I do think that this is very interesting. The market is going crazy at a time when they said these nerfs to AFK income generation are coming. So it used to be that you could multi-box Rorquals in relative safety in certain parts of the game and generate a ton of money through mining. But you could also use a Gila and pretty much solo parts of Abyssal space, and with a lot of confidence. And if you didn't want to do either of those two things, you could take a VNI, a Vexor Navy issue, and with drones, you could kind of AFK sites. So you could run 2 or 3 of those at the same time and generate income while you do something else. All of those are kind of AFK-ish. And then, of course, there were the carriers that were used to take on anomalies. These used to be taken on by battleships, and you had to really fit your ship well, your battleship, to take on anomalies. And then people started using carriers.
They were used by carriers back when carriers still had like mass drones. Like I remember trying to freaking kill the Chimera fit that had the cap stable at jump cap. So as soon as your HK decloaked, it jumped out to a pre-lit Sino and like complete safety. Yeah.
And they also I thought they used carriers to launch the drones and then to attach them to a different ship. Remember, what was that called? Yes. Skynet.
Yeah, so those were 2 different things. Like, okay. So carriers used to be able to, because the fighter support units used to let you launch multiple drones. So like a carrier could have, if I recall, like 15 sentries out or something stupid like that. And so you'd have a Chimera with 15 guard 2s sitting in a Garista's Haven. But it'd be fit with a bunch of X-type tanks and a medium shield booster, such that it would always be at jump cap. And of course, that meant as soon as anything decloaked on grid with it, it'd just jump out, and the sentries use their drone aggro to just run the site AFK. It's like an AFK VNI, except you're a capital ship and you have a get out of jail free button.
Yeah.
And then Skynetting was using fighters, which used to be hot garbage. but you would assist them to, in low sec, it was usually a hyena, which would fly around, and nobody would expect a hyena to be able to kill them, so they'd engage with it. But then the hyena would provide webs and target painters to then let the fighters following behind nuke whatever it was shooting.
Right. So
there was a bug as well. It was at one point with assisting fighters onto certain things that you could basically like up the damage of fighters like significantly, or up the damage of drones significantly when you assign, and like when you assigned them to something and then dropped the assignment and reassigned them and dropped assignment and reassigned. Like it was super broken, but they patched that, which is nice.
Right, and Spooned Avenger there says fighters for level 5 missions was probably a thing. Okay, so the point is that the ability for capitals, even super capitals, to do a lot of crabbing or ratting, basically ISK generation gameplay, is kind of a problem, right? Like people are able to use super carriers to generate a ton of money while they're playing. That isn't so much AFK, but it's a real powerful money making machine. So that is part of the capital balance. A lot of that stuff is nerfed in this balance update that's coming in April. And if I look at it as a whole, what I'm looking at, I think, is basically income generating behaviors are being nerfed tremendously from different directions, including the Rorqual.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much income generation scalability is being nerfed, but like there is a degree. Like, I mean, they changed fighters to be a mechanic that requires a lot of clicking, a lot of actions per minute, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Specifically to curtail it from being something that you could scale up significantly.
Yeah.
I don't think they consider Rorquals to be that much, because it's not dumping like money into the game. It's basically just, it's moving and shifting and changing, like, stuff that's already in the game, or stuff that's meant to be in the game anyway. So like, but to some degree, yeah, that is a bit of a contentious point. That is a point that people do tend to understandably like to argue about.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's a case of like, it's the activities that, to some degree, that allow almost infinite scaling, that kind of needs to die.
Well, yeah, it's a problem. Here, Jintan asks about high-angle weaponry. Those are basically guns for dreadnoughts and titans that can shoot subcapital ships with some efficiency. And if they're going to be nerfed, and the answer is not written here, but the answer is yes, as we know now, those are being nerfed, at least for titans. And for dreads as well, they're reduced by 50%. But if you are in a dread and you turn on your siege cycle, which means you can't move, but you basically become a turret, then you can get back up to 100% of what the damage is now. So yeah, the damage for those was cut in half, unless you're in siege, in which case it's not changed. So CCP Dragon also says lowering the dreadnought insurance payouts. And I think what they meant to do with that is to make it hurt a little more when you drop a dread bomb and lose it all. A dread bomb is a group of dreads that you drop. You basically spawn them into an area and create a huge amount of damage, and as fast as you can, and you expect them all to die. Yeah,
you don't want them to be a tool that anybody can use. Well, I say anybody. You don't want them to be a tool that, the people who have shit tons of resources can just drop all the time without some degree of outlay required.
This is extremely important, considering the remote rep diminishing returns that we're seeing. Diminishing returns is the proper term, not stacking penalties.
Yeah, diminishing
because
returns.
with the diminishing returns, the math is changing on dread bombs. Now you can no longer completely negate a dread bomb by just bringing more faxes. There will come a point where more faxes will not counteract more dreads. And so test being able to throw 300 dreads at the Northern Super Capital Fleet like they did in their Agenna deployment, that would suddenly be significantly more effective. You would have basically be guaranteed some number of super capital kills with a 300-man dread bomb. And so you have to balance the amount of ISK put on the line with that dread bomb compared to the amount of ISK put on the line with that super capital fleet, because some of the supers are guaranteed to die now.
Yeah, you're going to get something. And by something, it could be 1 or 2 Titans. Or, it depends on what's dropped.
Well, but it will require coordination, though. Like, that's the thing. Like, it will require a hard amount of coordination because, as you bring your dread bomb in, you need to basically maximize your killing potential before you actually start hemorrhaging dreads to Titans, for example.
So tell your pilots to train into Revelations.
I thought Naglfars were going to be.
Train into listening to the FC.
Cool. We have Tuzy and Bard Ghost with us now.
I don't know how long I can stay. I've got a toddler running around, but I'm here.
Let's take a pause and actually talk a little bit about the market. What did you say was going to happen, and how close are we to saying what it was?
So the mining changes that's coming in with the patch will put additional pressure on just mining across the board from titanium all the way up to dysprosium. But in addition to that, a lot of the folks that have been working, a lot of the people who had large stockpiles predating the refinery patch coming in October of 2017, those stockpiles are starting to run. And with the mining nerfs coming in, it will exacerbate the issue. So you'll start to see manipulation happen in the market over the next 2 or 3 months. And I really think by midsummer, you're going to see major changes, major upheavals, and which is going to start to affect things across the board that need Moongoo to be built, namely T2.
That'll affect a lot of people's doctrine choices, for sure.
Yeah, one of the other things is since around about when we wrapped up the war last year, which ended in September, there's been some conflicts here or there, but nothing on the scale of daily doctrine ships dying in large quantities day in and day out, week after week after week. And thus there's not been a huge demand for people buying thousands of doctrine. I really do think that there's probably going to be some kind of war somewhere that kicks off in the next couple months, just with all of the, you've got the nip with Guardians of the Galaxy expiring, you've got the nip with Fraternity and Legacy expiring, winter's over, people are kind of bored, people are going to want to do stuff. I just don't see the case where there's peace continuing like it has been. I think there's going to be some large war kicking off somewhere, maybe multiple. And if a lot of ships start dying, that's going to put further pressure on Moongoo.
Do you think? Yeah. Sorry, just a quick question. Do you think with the changes regarding the increase of price of T2 stuff, like is this just going to further push people into the first choice of a doctrine call being Feroxes?
Well, I'm the absolute wrong person to ask when it comes to PvP stuff. I really think the larger coalitions are always going to have some go-to T1 doctrines simply because, and especially not doctrines that are faction ships of any sort. Just because it's like you look on the market, and it's like, okay, you can put together a fleet of 255 of those, maybe 2, maybe 3. But as soon as you've lost a couple and there's not enough quantity on the market in JITA to resupply that, then you've got to switch to something that's T1, because you can't build everything else fast enough to replace your losses. So I think you're always going to have people relying on T1 battleships or T1 hacks, or not hacks, but cruisers or something. And then they'll have some other T2 doctrines that are more niche purposes. Yeah, I mean, a lot of that is just when we make those kind of decisions of what we're using for doctrine, a lot of it is skill requirements. Your T1, you're allowing every single noob in the alliance with minimal effort to be able to get into that ship. And it's also a factor of, can we acquire thousands of these hulls on short notice when we have a bunch of whelps a couple days in?
Well, I just took a browse of raw materials from moons, and there's a few of them that are definitely taking sharp turns up, but not all of them.
So here's what you look at. So a lot of people make the mistake of looking at historical graphs. Look at R64s and R16s, because they're tied together. You basically can't make any complex reaction. Like if you're using thulium, you're also going to be using hafnium, because you have to have hafnium to react thulium to make photonics. So when thulium goes up, you'll start to see hafnium and R16s related to that go up. Same thing with Dispro, Neo, and Prom with the cadmium, platinum, and chromium. But go and take a look at Dispro.
Dispro, yeah, right.
And look at how much is on the market right now. Like just quantity. You're looking at 300, 400,000. Most I see. Neo, look at Neo.
I had to adjust my screen because it looked like it went on, but that's it.
Yeah, look at Neo. Look, Neo's more dramatic.
Before we go too far down this rabbit hole, though, clarification question. The Moongoo market's like you're staring at the market in JITA.
Yeah.
But Moongoo is designed to be refined locally. And a big conversation as of late has been local markets springing up, because it is just significantly better with citadels and all of the recent infrastructure changes to produce things locally. Is just the Moongoo, is it a factor that Moongoo is just not making it to JITA market, but is still available in quantity in local markets where stuff is being produced locally? Or do we still expect it to be going to a centralized market and then being distributed to manufacturers elsewhere?
That on theory, on paper, that theory sounds very sound. It seems logical that would be. But the main thing to consider is that a lot of the guys that mine Moongoo, and this is the case even in GSF, the same guy that's mining the Moongoo is not the same guy that's producing. And Moongoo is very lightweight. You can ship large quantities of Moongoo to JITA very cheaply. It's not like titanium or mineral, or even compressed. I mean, you can ship compressed minerals to JITA, and you can ship refined, reprocessed moon ore that's in goo form to JITA. And yes, you could very well sell a lot on your local market, or even find a local producer that you can just work out a deal and contract it to. But many of these regions are producing enough Moongoo that, and there are areas that there's not enough people living in them to consume all of the goo that it produces, and therefore the majority of all the goo that they produce gets sent to JITA, because that's the only place they can find enough people to buy it from them. So there may be some small corners of the galaxy like Delve, or like Legacy Space where Tess lives, or maybe some Guardians of the Galaxy space, maybe some PLNC space, that those guys are consuming maybe 20%, 40%, maybe even up to 50% of the goo that they mine locally back into their local market and local producers. But even in Delve, a ton of our guys who mine it simply ship it to JITA because they're too lazy to go and work out and find someone local to buy it and sell it, and there's not enough of a market of goo being bought and sold on the market for them to find buyers quick enough. Like these are miners like, oh, look, I just mined 2 billion of this. I want to be paid now. I don't want to sit there and babysit sell orders at 0.1 isking for 3 or 4 weeks. I just want to ship it to JITA and dump it. And so, yeah, there are certain cases here and there of the goo being consumed locally, and therefore, oh, you don't see it because it's being sold locally and it never makes it to JITA. But the vast majority of goo mined in the game, that's not the case. It all goes to JITA.
But JITA of today isn't the JITA of yesterday, is it? I mean, JITA is definitely losing power.
It is, yeah, because you've got all of the offshoring markets, they're all over the place. And then like even in Delve, it used to be when we lived in Declan, there were some things you could find on the market in Declan, but we still had to buy a lot of our stuff at JITA and ship it in. And down in Delve today, the vast majority of stuff I need day to day, ship holes and modules and all, I can buy locally. It's only when it's like some obscure, Tech 2 capital rig that I need that doesn't get bought and sold a lot of enough. I might have to buy that, or some obscure, like some of the new, when they did the Stargates and beacons and all, and you require some of the Travaglian, is it Travaglian? Travaglian, there you go. That loot to build the new Stargates and jump, there wasn't enough of that on the market. I had to bring that in from JITA. But it's like special materials or special items that don't have enough of a volume to buy and sell in a large quantity locally. That's the stuff you have to go to JITA for, because no one wants to build 5 of this capital rig that you take 3 months to sell, right? Yeah. You want to build that many and sell them now.
Yeah, you don't want to be tied up. You don't want your money tied up. You want to be able to make decisions quickly and move quickly. You need to be liquid for that.
Yeah, the other thing interesting is I foresee that that there's going to be a tightening across the board. An additional thing that's going to affect prices on everything from tritanium to dysprosium to rigs to, just anything bought and sold on the market anyway. Especially JITA is going to see a price increase simply because of the nerfs to ice mining that they made with the ice mining drones, which is going to increase fuel prices across the board, which is going to increase shipping across prices across the board. And the sellers will just factor that into the price of the item when they list it on the market.
So, was ice mining hit disproportionately to regular ore mining?
No, I think it was. I would have to go back and look at the numbers, but I think they increased the cycle time on the drone.
And not by that much, but
not by that much, but it will be, 5% is still 5%. You don't think that the producer's can eat that cost himself. He'll still factor that into the price.
Yeah.
But I think it was more than 5%, but I don't think it was quite as much as what regular.
If I recall correctly, regular moon ore, because the excavator yield went down from 1,000 to 800, so that was a 20%.
20%, right? Yep. And ice mining, it's something about was the I don't ice mine, so I didn't pay that much attention to it. But the guys that do ice mine were not happy because apparently ice mining is already like a bigger, it's not like there's ice belts in every single system. Ice belts are extremely limited. And when you clear out an ice belt, there's a very long respawn timer before it comes back. And if you go and drop a refinery on a moon and mine the moon, you're never going to get ice from it, right? The only sources of ice in the game are the predetermined systems that have ice belts, and they're limited quantity, and they have a very slow respawn. So any nerf that you do to ice mining across the board is going to directly translate into increased fuel.
Yeah, it says right here it was 250 seconds, and it's up to 310 seconds. So it takes a little longer to get the ice. Therefore, you will end up mining less ice over time.
So it'll take a lot longer. Yeah. Which will, it may not have a direct translation of like, 10% nerf or 20% nerf, but there will be some kind of, less ice coming to the market. I need to step away for just a second. I'll be back.
All right, Tuzy, thanks.
It's approximately a 25% increase because about 240, 250 is about 250 seconds is basically 4 minutes 10 seconds. So
Well,
you're pushing it to, if you're pushing it to 310, it's basically like 3 minutes and 10 seconds.
it's not direct because some people will just mine a little bit longer and keep the market where it is.
Yeah, or I'm back. Or you can, like a lot of people, just add, if I had 4 Rorks before, I'll just add a 5th Rork.
Yeah, you can make up for that. But it has a corrosive effect. Billy was upset too. He was saying like, well, I don't know why they hit that. I don't know why they hit ice. Ice basically creates fuels, and fuels actually get people traveling to do stuff. And he didn't think it needed to be hit, but
yeah, I didn't think it did either. That puzzled me. The only thing I could think of there is they want, I don't know. I was speculating maybe they were doing it for liquid ozone, but it seems not smart to nerf, isotopes and thus fuel blocks and heavy water and strontium and everything else just to nerf LO. Seems like there's other way to tackle the LO issue.
Yeah, let's see.
Well, I mean, a lot of the complaints have been that everything is getting too cheap. Mostly that's regarding capitals, and insurance is a way to get at that. They've also mentioned that botting is a big thing that they consider to be an issue, skipping down further in the minutes. But
I think the main...
everything is getting... Go ahead.
Well,
I was just going to say, I think the main focus here is they're just going after faucets, right? So there's rampant inflation across the board, and they're trying to tamp down on the amount of ISK being added to the economy any way they can, whether that's from riding bounties or insurance payout or everything. I think they care less that Titans are 38 billion, and they care more that there's just way more ISK out there. So the value of every one ISK is decreasing, which is doing things like also increasing PLEX prices. Like, inflation is not good for the economy across the board. And I think it's just, they're just trying to turn off the faucets as much as possible.
I know, I agree with you that they're looking to shut down faucets. That's income coming into the game out of nowhere. But as far as inflation, somebody asked before, where is their inflation? Is it only PLEX and injectors? It was Crush 4 or Crush 35. Basically says, what inflation? The only inflation I see is the price of PLEX and injectors.
Yeah, so inflation... there's more. Okay, so let's the ISK, the economy is a bathtub, right? Matterall's wallet and my wallet and the Goonswarm corporate wallet and the Pandemic Legion corporate wallet and everyone's wallets in the game, all of the ISK that's available in the game for players to use is the water in the bathtub. When you keep adding more and more and more and more water to the bathtub, and the bathtub keeps getting bigger, and sorry, my son is yelling about this Matchbox cars in the other room. It makes everyone's water less valuable because there's more water to go around, right? Water's easier to come by because there's just more of it. So if you go and the reason I have a minor and my minor at my degree was in economics. So if you go back and take an microeconomic 101 course at any university in the world, one of the first things they teach you in the first 2 months of the course is the concept of inflation. And you can go back and look at economies throughout the world, throughout history. Argentina was one in the middle of the 20th century. There's a bunch of economies around the world that had this. I think Venezuela is going through this right now. This is why the U.S. Mint, when the U.S. government needs more money, they simply can't just print more money. It's going to hurt the economy to do that. This is why the Federal Reserve raises interest rates to try to keep inflation down. You can't just keep adding more and more and more and more and more total currency into the bathtub and have prices not stay the same. The reason PLEX is going up is not just this one issue. Yeah, I will say that you're right there. It's not just inflation, but the combination of there being more demand for PLEX because there's more alts and botters contribute to that. And the fact that the botters are putting more ISK into the game, so there's more ISK to go around, so the value of ISK is decreasing, is doing things like increasing the value of PLEX, is making it so that you know, people just have more ISK, so it doesn't hurt as much to lose a 15 billion super today than it did 5 years ago.
Why do you think Plex has skyrocketed in the last week?
Well, I don't know. I don't understand what's going on with Plex right now.
Yeah.
I think it's a combination of you can't point to one thing. It's a combination of a lot of different things. It's
Right.
There's more characters needing it, whether that be bots or whatever. There's less players. There's more veteran players that have the ability to earn enough ISK in game to buy Plex than there are newbie players that don't have that ability that are willing to fork over the $20 to buy 500 Plex from CCP or whatever. I forget. You know, that they don't want to spend the money to buy the Plex to Plex their account because they own a super now and they can write up the ISK to buy a Plex. So there's just less people willing to fork over real life cash for Plex than there are people that need Plex to Plex their accounts. And everyone has more ISK. It's not a big of a deal to have a billion ISK anymore if you're a newbie.
That's ridiculous.
It's a lot of different things added together. You can't just say, oh,
not
it's
everybody,
this one thing.
but some people, yeah.
Yeah.
I wanna quickly do a bit of summary and a bit of clarification. And I'm going to use some terms here. So economics was my major.
There you go. Then you know what I'm talking about.
Granted, I focused more on behavioral economics and micro rather than macro, which is what we're discussing now. So there are more intelligent perspectives than mine. But when we talk about inflation, we're specifically discussing the purchasing power of your ISK, right? How much stuff can you trade for that bit of ISK? And we're seeing that inflation most specifically in Plex, because Plex is not something which we're also seeing the pool of it increase, to use Tuzy's swimming or bathtub analogy, right? With minerals, with moon goo, with T1 minerals, and that then gets into the markets for your ships and things like that, we're seeing more and more water being poured into the bathtub because of rorquals, because getting those minerals is so easy. It doesn't matter that the purchasing power of your ISK is going down due to inflation when the amount of minerals and the amount of ships available is also rising, so their value is decreasing. That's why you're not seeing inflation in all of these other things. It's because it's relatively balancing out with the decreasing purchasing power of your ISK and the decreasing value of any individual ship because of the increasing number of ships and the increasing number of minerals.
Yeah, and this is why when you see a big war happen, like when the big war kicked off last year, and we moved a lot of our supers north, and a lot of those guys that were, you know, on fleets doing strat ups every day, you know, flying supers and titans around, that means they weren't in delve rorqual mining, and you saw mineral prices go way back up. If you go look at the price of titanium on the market, and I'm actually looking right now.
I'll find it.
Yeah, pull up titanium and look at the graph of the price history of titanium over the last year, and look at the spike between July and September.
Yeah, it's gargantuan.
That's when we left Delve. We, in early July, like all through from like January, February of last year up until July, we were doing six and squad, Space Violence, Reavers, Black Ops, all those guys, Liberty Squad were up there screwing with. And then right around sometime in mid-July or so is when we said, oh, well, let's bring Supers and Titans to 6-star CQ. That's the war. And then you see that spike and everything going back down. That's when we went back home. And the economy leveled back out in November.
It's not just the Delve production went down then, right? Because you leaving Delve, you were disrupting production in all of the north as well. So the only production that was taking place was over in the east at the time. So half of the map stopped producing. It wasn't just Delve. Granted, Delve was like 60 to 70% of it, but 30% of that is the north was shut down because you guys weren't mining.
That said, I don't think people transport titanium. It seems like they transport... Am I wrong about that? Because you can't compress it. You transport compressed.
Compressed spod, yeah.
So let's look at compressed spod.
Yeah, are you kidding me? We have some guys that mine, you know, I know of, I don't know, the guy I'm thinking of right now is AFK right now and not playing, but he used to play on a regular basis, and he multi-boxed like, I don't know, a bunch of oracles, a couple dozen oracles, and he would mine hundreds of billions of ore a month. And he would, like, he mined so much, it was too big of a hassle for him to reprocess and delve and try to list it on the market. If he could find some producer that needed that much ore, he would work out a one-time deal with them and like, okay, let's agree on a price. Okay, you're happy with this. Here's all of it. And you just, hand me 150 billion ISK or how much ever. But when he could not find a buyer, or was too lazy, or just didn't give a shit, he shipped it all to JITA in compressed form. So yeah, absolutely, you can move minerals around very, very easily in large quantities.
Okay, well, the spike also works for SPOD too, so you're right, or at least compressed SPOD.
Yep. Always look at compressed when it's regular non-Moongu. No one moves around non-compressed ore. If they do, they don't know what they're doing.
And no one certainly moves around refined titanium.
Yeah,
well, that's what I was.
No one moves around refined titanium. So the titanium you see on JITA is stuff that got it's all the minerals you see in HiSec are HiSec miners reprocessing locally and selling on the market. That's not like no one from nullsec is moving compressed ore to JITA and then refining it in JITA and listing on the market. That's all like, the random Hulk that, Code is ganking yesterday. That's where the titanium came from.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, you can take ore and then you can compress it so that you can essentially move more of it, and it becomes a lot more worth it. And so when you're looking at imports and exports, you want to look at compressed ores. Now, the reason we're looking at SPOD is because that generates a ton of titanium when it's refined or reprocessed. And that's a big holder of titanium. So that's when we want to look at titanium, we want to look at SPOD, its asteroid form, and then we want to look at the compressed SPOD, its travel form, if that makes sense. That's interesting. Yeah, massive spikes there. I didn't realize actually until just now how big that spike was. That was huge. I just knew once the war started, I sold off all my titanium that was sitting around. Okay.
One thing, sorry, my wife was telling me something. One thing to keep in mind there also is a huge so yes, we had also left, right? But when did X47 happen? Right? You had all of those supers and titans dying on both sides, and you had some producers on each side who had enough minerals to put them all on bill. But I know personally we were able to through buying some that were for sale on our market. And maybe we had some guy that had 3 titans and he had left one in Delve and he didn't need one right now, so he like sold his hull to the Alliance so they could SRP with. But we had a shortfall of hulls that we could not get our hands on immediately, and we had to go and hoover up a bunch of minerals to build them. And so that part of some of that spike came from that as well.
Yeah, X47 was August, right at the peak of this.
Yeah, so yeah, that you see that big, super sharp decline increase there with that peak there in mid-August. I think that was all.
But it wasn't because of the it wasn't because of the space station or the Keepstar X47. It was because of the destruction of the ships, because that's what takes minerals, not the structures. Right, X47, the North lost many titans, which take a ton of minerals.
Yeah, I mean, we lost a bunch too.
Did you?
I forgot what the we lost.
Yeah,
they lost a lot, but we also lost a lot too. I think it was like, I don't know, 10 or 20 or something like too, right? I don't remember the exact amount.
That's not a lot. Just kidding.
Well, the losses on the hull timer were drastically smaller than the losses on the armor
one
timer.
Was very
and they
lopsided,
were
but the other one
20 to 30 per side in terms of Titan.
Yeah. And so when you add that up, that's 60. That's a lot of titanium to build 60 titans.
That is a lot.
Not to mention the tackle supers that got nuked.
Oh yeah, the meme supers. Yeah, I forgot about that.
I see. So that That definitely pulls on the market.
I distinctly remember around about that time that people were saying that, you know, I'm not sure whether it was titanium specifically, but like some minerals were basically completely bought out in Jeddah. Do you
Yeah,
remember that?
and that was a big deal because
That was then.
a lot of the north, does not. They don't have a huge market like we do in 1DQ1, in which, if you can't find it in 1DQ1, you go to Jita. The reason Pandemic Legion and NC Dot live in Tribute is because they're lazy and want to undock a jump freighter from Jita and jump it right into Tribute. It's easy logistics. So when Jita runs out of something, that's it. There are no more to be found. And some of that is when I remember our finance guys in the middle of that fight, while the fight was still going on, our finance guys were like, lol, the North is going to have hard problems finding minerals. Oops, I just bought out all of Jita of all the minerals. Haha.
You guys consider Jita basically the marketplace for the North, don't you?
Yeah, right.
And you're creating the southern one.
Yeah. Well, the Goon one. I don't know about the southern one. Test has their own.
That's
like we wiped out Jita of a bunch of minerals simply because it wasn't all that much ISK, and it meant they couldn't easily get more minerals to build.
So if you're looking to hurt the economic machinery of the North, you're going to hit Jita with manipulations, basically.
Well, not. I mean,
I'm just saying it in an obscure way.
but that's not. We don't go after Jita, like, not really. Like, a lot of that is just manip for the whole game, because the whole game relies on.
Okay.
It's not like we're specifically going after the North when we do that. It's more we're just going after everyone who's not up.
Yeah, I had another question, but I forgot what it was. Nope, didn't come back to me. All right. I think it's super interesting. So, that's what it was. This is a little obscure, but that spike, when I look at it, it's dreadful because it tells me that we're one cataclysmic battle away from a major disturbance in basically mineral costs. So,
well, I mean,
even though everybody's producing
that in life as well,
a major temporary disturbance. I think you got to remember that as soon as the price spikes, suddenly it's much more worth it for any Joe Schmo to grab his Hulk and get out into a belt. Or in this particular case, any Joe Schmo to grab his work and get out into an Anom.
Yeah, I guess it's not cataclysmic. I mean, the fight would have to be cataclysmic, right? 60 Titans plus the threat of more. You need the threat of more, too. It can't just be one fight. Creates the draw on minerals, but look how severe that is. Inside of a month, that's jumped from, it's essentially doubled in cost.
Yeah, the other thing to consider in a big fight like that, if one side were to lose, well, I mean, it doesn't mean of one side. If just the total amount of Titans that dies in the fight is, getting up into the 30, 40, 50, 60. As you can see from this graph, especially when you have two fights, Henry's in my office, when you have two fights like that right close together, you basically wipe out Jita of minerals to be able to replace them. So if you were to have a big long war in which 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of those big fights happen, you start getting into a situation where one side or both sides can't SRP them fast enough. And it's not the fact that they don't have the ISK to do it. It's that there's just not enough minerals on the market to replace them. And you'll get to the fact where, okay, let's say both sides show up to a fight and they each have 1,000 Titans and they have a fight, and maybe they show up to the next one and they also have 1,000 Titans because they were somehow able to SRP them. And then the third fight and the fourth fight and the fifth fight, when you start getting up 3, 4, 5, you'll start being, each side now has 800 Titans. Now they're down to 700, and now they're down to 600. You're going to start taking losses that you can't bring back to the next fight.
What I like here is to see the demand drop off for titanium when that spike goes way up, as people are like, yeah, that's too expensive, I'm not going to pay for all that. And then it's just so beautifully correlated, right? Yeah, that's what's really interesting about the market. It's like watching water flow. You have an idea of which way it should go, but it takes its own route even through there. But it all makes sense once you see it pass. Okay. Let's go back to... Thanks, man. I appreciate looking at that. I hadn't looked back at mineral prices in a long time.
Yeah, and I'm just glancing at some others. If you look at some of the others, it's the same thing with Mega, massive spike. I just looked at Max, same thing. Actually, Max is different.
Max is different. Yeah.
Well, okay. So here's the thing. Click on Max.
I'm on it now. It'll take a second for you to see it, but there's a bit of a bump. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not as pronounced, and that's because if you go look at the ratios, when you get to building big ships like Supers and Titans, they just require the ratio of trit they need. It's just way higher than some of the other minerals.
Yeah. I actually mapped out the ratios of modules versus the ratio of ships, and it's different. You need more titanium for ships. Because I wanted to always have like building minerals in ratio to one another, so I didn't run out of one and have to go to the market to get it or whatever. Like I would always have it kind of going, all of it going together, so I could build stuff without stopping.
That's the question I wanted to ask with regards to the discussion on T2 Moongoo and such. How significant of an impact does a rise in Moongoo prices have on T2 modules, which are used in literally every doctrine, whether they're T1 or T2 ship hulls themselves?
That I don't know. I don't build those. If I could tell you everything you want to know about building structures, but I don't get into subcap building at all or module. All the stuff I do, it has to do with Citadel building, stuff like iHub upgrades, rigs for Citadels. There's for instance, I can tell you right now, there's a massive salvage crunch across the galaxy on certain types of salvage because there's bottlenecks and there's basically hardly any on the market. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, you got to wonder though when you start to see the goo manip happen and the prices start going really whack, and whenever the goo manip happens, there's going to be 2, 3, 4 week delay before you start to see the same prices reflect into the actual Moongoo products, the reaction product, and then you're going to see another 2 or 3 week delay before you start to see the price increase in the T2 component, and then another week or two delay before you see the increase in the actual ship hull. So it's like a chain reaction, a wave down the line. And it's all a matter of if someone down that production line has a big stockpile, can their stockpile ride out the wave or not? Because if it can't, then you'll start to see it accelerate up and with the price changes on the final thing.
Yeah, when the Moongoo changes came, as soon as the announcement happened, there was a huge buying spree. And I looked at it and thought, well, I didn't get in on the ground floor of that one because I was 12 hours late, right, in the US Pacific time zone. So instead, I looked up the ladder and I thought, well, I'll just buy some jump freighters instead. And it took a while, but eventually they went up from like 8 billion to 12 billion each.
Yeah. It'll take a while. There's a lot of people in this game, and Reddit, you see this a lot of, like, a dev blog will come out or some patch happens and 2 seconds go by and they're like, well, the thing everyone said that was supposed to happen didn't happen, so therefore it's not going to happen, because they have the attention span of a goldfish. And they don't understand the implications of the time it takes for events in the game to impact other parts of the game with regard to the economy. Like, these things take time to shake out, and a lot of that time is dependent upon how long it takes to run a reaction to react that much Moongoo. Is it going to take you 7 days, 10 days? And that's partially a function of how many build slots you've got and how many blueprints you have. Wow. But most of your producers don't have 50 production alts and 100 billion S worth of blueprints to put them all into service.
I think a significant factor in regards to response time is also player speculation and the complexity of the impact of the changes. So a lot of this industrial stuff, it requires a very in-depth knowledge of what goes where. You're right. You've got a massive chain of events that happens to where the change happens and what it eventually ends up affecting, and by how much it will affect it. And so that leads to the number of people who could speculate on the market in a profitable way. In other words, they know that the price is going to rise and they know what is a safe bet and what is not a safe bet to make, is very small. And so it's less likely that they will speculate on the market and push the market price up to where it would be in the future naturally anyway.
Yeah.
Whereas comes to mind the carrier changes, the NSA announcement change. Instantly, people realized, hey, faction SIBOs can replace the NSA and you don't have the warp change. So instantly that market adjusted, right? The knowledge and the ability for more players to speculate kickstarted that acceleration in price.
It was faction SIBO?
All these industry things, yeah, faction SIBOs.
Sensor boosters, by the way.
Yeah. But because all of these industrial things, the number of players who have that knowledge and who could make that bet is significantly smaller. And so the amount of speculation is lower. And so there's a slower rise in that price as well.
Yeah, prices them out of the market. Like look at a big example of this is a lot of people were looking at PLEX prices in the last couple of days, and they blew through 4 billion, and I think in the span of 12 hours they hit 4.1 or 4.2, and then yesterday they did a run all the way up to 4.5, 4.6, and then they stopped at 4.7. And the reason they stopped at 4.7 is because I Choose You dumped 2.7 trillion ISK of PLEX on the market at that price, and no one had, well, maybe Aerith did or someone like that, but Aerith is not dumb. He's not going to do it. You don't have anyone with enough ISK to buy him out to allow the price to keep rising. Basically, he put his foot on the PLEX price and said, PLEX may not rise anymore above this price. I decree it with my wall of 2.7 trillion ISK of PLEX.
Yeah, you shall not pass.
Yeah, he basically put the brakes on it. Now, why he was doing that, I don't know. I don't know if he's part of the manip. I don't know if has this warm feeling in his heart and he's doing it for the good of the game. I don't know. I just know he did it, and it had that.
I asked him, and he said partly because partly to to slow down the craziness, but the other thing was he was daring somebody to buy him out.
Yeah, I don't think anyone will. I think he also is smart enough to know that when PLEX prices get too expensive, the volume of PLEX being bought and sold it will go down enough. Like if he's one of the guys that holds PLEX, he's probably selling a lot of PLEX on a regular basis, and he knows that he will make more money when PLEX is priced at 4 million ISK a unit than if it's at 5 million ISK a unit.
Yeah, I was looking at that because I thought that was an interesting strategic move. Okay, ICU, that guy that put that PLEX ceiling, is also the guy that essentially got pushed out by Test, right?
Yeah, same guy.
Test is making a bunch of money off PLEX taxes. So how could he be trying to manipulate the PLEX market to hurt demand, to in some way hurt Test, who is his natural enemy? And I couldn't see it. If it's happening, I don't know how it works. But the only thing I could think of was that he's discouraging demand, and therefore the less people participate in that market buying it through Test, the less money Test sees.
Yeah, I don't think
he's not doing that. If he wanted to hurt Test income from taxes, he would want to decrease the volume of transactions, as Tuzy was talking about. And if that were the case, he would not want to put a ceiling on the market. He wants the price to increase. As the price increases, the number of transactions decreases, thus the income from taxes decreases. What he has done helps Test tax income.
I know. Right. I know. That's why I couldn't see it. But I was thinking what you would want to do is discourage people from buying PLEX in JITA, but encourage people buying PLEX somewhere else. And I looked around over the map to see if there was huge sales on PLEX somewhere.
I mean,
it
people
didn't happen.
People are going to come to JITA no matter what. No one's going to, because the problem is if there's some other place he's trying to direct people to and it's not within range of JITA, no one's going to know where it is. No one's going to go there.
You just need to be within the province, though, right? Or within the region.
I mean, if you're at buy range, but I consider, I mean, yeah, you've got offshoring stuff, but I consider everything within buy range of JITA to be JITA.
Yeah,
like I don't really give a shit who's making the taxes from it. It's like it's being bought and sold in the JITA.
No, but I'm thinking if you move the market to a MAR, for instance.
Yeah, but the problem is all the guys buying and selling plugs don't like. How do you communicate to them? Hey, everyone, go to Omar instead this week. You know,
You dump
that's
a
the
bunch
problem.
of cheap Plex in Amar,
The
but the
people
problem
who
is
do
it
it
travels.
regularly
Yeah.
have tools to pull market data. The question is just, are they pulling market data from everywhere or only from Judah market or the region? Like for me, when I need to go buy Plex, I go to the Fuzzworks market, I search Plex, and because Plex can be transported via the vault, I just go to wherever it's cheapest in an interceptor and then chuck it in my vault.
That's the reason it wouldn't work. Yeah.
Yeah, because the people will literally just sit in a Mar and buy it, throw it in their wallet, and spit it out in Jita and resell it.
And resell it.
Like, thanks for the cheap Plex. I'm just going to send it right back over here and sell it again.
Well, that's why I couldn't see it. Like that was I don't think he was. There's no way. But I thought it was interesting.
I don't think he's manipulating. I think
he's not. I don't think so.
He smartly said, "The bet as I've made all of this money, you know, back before Test brought their market in, right? He had this Keepstar or he didn't have Keepstar and Perimeter, but he had a market and Perimeter. He was sitting on it for months and months and months, making all this money, and he was like, "I'm making all this money. What should I do with it? I shouldn't just put it here in my bank account and let it sit here and not do anything. I should probably just put it into Plex, like invest in a Plex." So if you want to know how much money that guy earned total off of all of his markets, look at how much his Plex is, how much Plex he's got. Now, that's not you can't really say he earned that amount because that's what it's valued at today's current Plex prices. But go back and see when he first put his market down. I don't know when that was, 2 years ago. Look at the Plex price of the month he first put it down, and look at the price of Plex the day that his market finally left and Test took over, and track the price of Plex. And over time, every time he made a little ISK, he turned around and bought Plex with it at whatever the current Plex prices was. And you can then get a rough estimation of how much ISK he made from his venture. Now, I also heard someone say yesterday, and you know, take this with a big shovel full of salt. I don't know if the guy's talking out of his ass or what, but someone said that the amount of Plex you saw him drop on the market in that sell order was only half of it.
Yeah,
I don't know where that source. Yeah, I know. So he could have more. I mean, probably does have more.
Well, I think he's bought.
You've also got to subtract the $250 billion ISK he's dropped in Asbels in the market
that
to
too.
mess with testing.
Yeah, we thought for a long time, and everyone. It's funny because I've seen you guys talk about it before, and other people talk about it before, and like, oh, how much money was he really earning? The MER tells you exactly how much money he was earning because the MER breaks down how much. As it's like on one of the graphs, it tells you what the total ISK payout to players in market taxes are, and I don't know HiSec very well. We're in the Forge. Jita is in the Forge. If you go back and look at all the MERS since HiSec markets became a thing, offshoring markets became a thing, and look at the graph that shows you how much ISK is being paid out to players in the terms of market taxes in the Forge. I mean, the vast majority of all of that was whoever had the perimeter market or all those offshore markets. So if it was just I choose you for all those months, that graph is literally his income.
So how much is it?
I don't know. I'd have to go back and look, but I think at one point we looked at it and said he was between 3 and 500 billion ISK a month.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. So 3 and 500 billion ISK a month after month after month after month after month for how long ever he had.
Well, he had to pay portion of that to Horde for defending his stuff.
Well, yeah, and we don't know exactly what that deal was and all, and his income wasn't the same every month. His taxes fluctuated, so it's not as cut and dried as that graph, but that gives you a good idea.
I was looking around, and I choose you, and this is not an endorsement, but just telling you that he has this fund where you can pay in Plex and get 1%, and I don't know if that's a good investment or not, but I will drop it inside of chat, and actually I'll put it in links in Talking in Stations Discord. And again, I'm not endorsing it, but if that's something that you're interested in, you basically give your money over to this guy, and this guy invests it, and he pays you. What happens in Eve, though, is a lot of those guys kind of walk off, but, you know, it depends on a person's reputation. I'll put it here in links. Okay, I have to cut this short because I just got a work call, so I got to get over to the office. We're not going to be able to finish CSM, which is okay. But I encourage all of you to read it because a lot of the financial stuff that we're talking about now is in this CSM report. When we read the CSM report, we try to figure out where the game's going. We try to figure out what will be affected, where CCP will change mechanics in order to make something cheaper or more expensive, and then we adjust before it even happens. There are people who are really good at this. I would not count myself among them. Maybe, but I would not count myself among them. There are people who are really good at this. And as Tuzy was saying, there's bottlenecks in salvage. If you figure out what that salvage is that's bottlenecked because its price is really high, like out of whack, then you can probably assume that CCP is going to put another demand on it. Sorry, or supply it more of it. And that's the kind of, or the opposite, right? If something is just useless in the game, and they're talking about how they want to fix that area of the game, then that thing is probably going to get enhanced in a way that it becomes more expensive. And that's the way you kind of look at the market for buying opportunities, is you look at what CCP is talking about, you look at what players are talking about, and you look at what's logical in the game, and then you make your buying decisions. So when the prices go up, you can then make your sell decisions. It's harder than it looks, but you know, you play this game for 10 years. You start to figure it out.
Well, so the thing you should also look at is in the past, like when CCP added engineering complexes, you know, they added citadels, and then months later engineering complexes came in, and then months later again refineries came in, and then months later stargates came in. When you were doing ECs and refineries in particular, they added new rigs to the game for those ECs and new rigs for refineries. And previously, when they added their first citadels, they went through and picked some different types of salvage and said, okay, out of the list of 50 types of salvage, these 10 different types of salvage are going to be what you need to make these rigs for the citadels, right? There were still 40 other types of salvage that weren't used for any structure rigs. And then when they added ECs to the game, they said, okay, well, we've picked a different 10 salvage that aren't being used for anything, and those are going to be the salvage you need to make the EC rigs. Well, smart people looked at it and said, oh, I know what's going to happen when they add refineries. Some of the other 30 that they haven't picked yet are going to be what is going to be for the refinery rigs. So before they even announced anything, before it was even, you know, they said, oh, refineries are coming later this year. Smart people said, well, we know they're going to have rigs, and we know they're going to pick salvage that no one's using yet based on their history. So let's just buy up as much of that cheap, unused salvage as possible. And some of it might not be what's picked, but some of it will, and hopefully that'll go up a lot. And that's what we did.
It's a good payoff, yeah.
And I made about 200 billion doing that. Personally, I know a lot of other people that made a lot more.
Yeah. I think the easiest example to see for me was when they said faction battleships are out of whack, they're too cheap. You had the players saying it. This is when Maccloud fleets were flying around everywhere.
Yeah, that's a simple one. Like, and Maccloud's doubled in price overnight or something.
It took a month, and they did it in 2 different stages. There was a little bit of complication with it. Like, do you buy the BPCs, or do you actually produce them? Like, what's going up, the mineral cost or the rarity of the blueprint? And so you had to kind of like watch that a little bit. But it was a pretty straightforward buy signal that was being sent by everything. Players, CSM, and CCP. We're all basically saying, yeah, we don't like where that's at. The price point is too low. So you know those are going up. So you either buy the ship when it's cheap and just store them, or you invest in the blueprints, and produce them. Any of those 3, when the price goes up, you'll be able to sell for more money. And so, yeah, there was a lot of money to be made there. I think the actual difference was it went from buying or making something that costs 300 or 400 million to it tacked on about 200 million per ship. So if you built 20 ships, that was a pretty good day. Something like that. In some cases more. I think if you did, rattlesnakes went up for a time up to 600 million, and they were at like, what? I think you could build them for, they all build at the same cost, right? All of the faction battleships cost the same to build. It was the blueprint that was a difference in price.
Rattlesnake used to be super cheap when we lived in Declan and we were farming the blueprint. When we left Declan, the Gilas and rattlesnakes went up.
Yeah.
Now look at all of the Blood Raider ones.
Well, CCP made two changes. They changed both things. So when they rebalanced faction battleships, they both increased the rarity of the BPCs and increased the mineral cost to build all of them.
So they did, but there was actually a month or 3 week lag. So the blueprints went up first, and then 3 weeks later, the build cost went up too. It was an interesting split. I don't know why they did that, but yeah, and I profited very well on that. It's just that's not your best place to profit. The really big wins, first of all, you have to have a lot of ISK to begin with, and it's what Tuzy was telling you. You buy the really cheap, scrappy material at the bottom, and then all of a sudden it becomes valuable, and that's how tycoons are made.
Yeah, like back in the day, I think it's been like 9 years. Guidance systems were something that was not used at all, and I was around back then, but I didn't take part in this, and I don't remember the exact details. But guidance systems were equivalently selling for pennies on the dollar, and you had like 1,000-fold price increase, and a bunch of people got early wind that based on this dev blog or whatever, they really quickly did the math and said, oh, well, this thing right here is going to be used. And there was just hundreds and hundreds of thousands of them on the market, or millions of them on the market. And these people bought up, for like, 50 billion or 100 billion or whatever, just as much as they get their hands on. And then overnight, that 100 billion turned into like 5 trillion or something. Yeah. And those same people have been like the I choose you guy not wanting PLEX to go through the roof. If he really is selling off that PLEX to make money, he knows that there's a certain threshold that when PLEX prices crosses over that line, he will earn less money because there's less people willing to buy at that price than what he wants. So like there's a sweet spot if you want to hit that exact price point to sell as much as possible for as much money as possible. Same thing with guidance systems. All the guys that have held all those guidance system stockpiles have been keeping guidance systems priced at this one price level for the last 9 years.
Yeah, they didn't overdump it, right?
Right,
yeah.
And they've been slowly selling it off. Well, I know that a couple of those guys have started to finally run out. And as a result, guidance systems are starting to go.
There's a couple people in that market that were big players that bought up a ton of it. One was Aerith.
Yeah.
You know who the second one was?
I know of 3 or 4 in Goons. I don't know if that's who you're talking.
No.
I know the Big Red Boat was one.
Nope, wasn't anybody in Goons.
He didn't have a lot.
You know who had a ton of those? Was CCP Quantum.
Oh, really? He was one.
CCP Quant was the other guy that held them. So
well, I know of 3 other Goons that had a massive stockpile, and their stockpile was actually bigger. And so that's why they still have theirs. Plus, they've been slower to sell theirs off.
Yeah. Well, he didn't sell his off either. He was slowly letting
using
it
go. Yeah, he was using his own, and some of these guys are too. Using this, some of them are using them, some of them are selling them. But yeah, look at January, look at guidance system prices up until January, and then go look at guidance prices systems what it's doing now.
So since January? So January, they were kind of low at like 90K. Right about there. It climbed up. Looks like they're taking a little bit of a nosedive, but... Well, anyway, this stuff is great. Like, I think the economics of EVE Online are some of the most fascinating stuff. The diplomacy,
my mic wasn't working. I was trying to tell you, slide your slider all the way to the left.
Okay.
You're zoomed in way too far to get to understand what I'm saying. See that?
See what?
The far right side. Look at the spike in the graph.
Oh, sorry, I was off screen.
You can't zoom in. You can't zoom in too far. You're only looking at like 30 days of data. You need to look at 365 days of data to
It'll
get
take a second to refresh, I think. Look at that spike. Wow.
So that's what I'm talking about. Whenever you look at this kind of stuff, you always need to look at a year out. Don't look at like a month.
I was trying to zoom in from January to now, but I had the important information off screen, so I apologize there. There's the actual graph. You can see a massive...
And look at the bottom. The volume is the same across the board. Yeah. It's just, you know, all of a sudden there's someone else buying that it wasn't buying before. Aerith.
Is he buying or just selling?
Buying. His stockpile ran out.
Oh, oh, that's interesting. That's why things are starting to. You're saying this.
That's what I'm telling you.
Huge increases in prices now because the stockpiles that have been suppressing prices have finally run out.
Yes, and Moon Good's been the case since October of 2017. People's stockpiles are starting to. Remember, I made that post before the patch. I said, I don't know when it's going to happen. It's going to take 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years.
Well, this is funny.
It's starting to happen.
This happens at a time where there's a frenzy for the RMT merchandise, which is all the stuff you pay for real money. But you really have a choice to make. Are you going to invest in minerals that and salvage and stuff like that go up and down in the game when that's running out, or the moon goo in this case? Or do you put your money inside of PLEX? Like, that's a real decision to make. I think you run away from PLEX. I think you sell PLEX.
I'm not in PLEX at all. I don't want to go anywhere near PLEX because you don't know. At some point, someone at CCP may make the decision that current prices are not good for us as a company, and it's hurting our bottom line on our financial books, and we need to. In the past, CCP has said, and they've done this before, like when they ban a bunch of botters or they ban a bunch of volunteers, they confiscate all of the PLEX on their accounts, and they have a separate pile of trillions of Visk of PLEX that are set aside that were confiscated from players. They don't delete it, but they don't put it back on the market. They just set it aside. And if they ever need to make a price correction to PLEX in the game, they take that they've set aside away from volunteers and botters, and that's what they use to put back on the market. Someone at CCP could very well tomorrow decide to drop the price of PLEX to 3 million ISK per with a stack of 5 trillion ISK on the market. You don't know when that's going to happen or if it will ever happen.
Or you
and for that reason, I don't want to be anywhere near PLEX.
Yeah, you get a series of sales that come in. And you know that CSM is complaining about it in February. And that was, February is like way over here on the graph, right? Oh, that's not PLEX. But basically, if they're complaining about it in February, saying it's too high, be careful, and the price is spiking, and then in the last week, really spiking, it's overheated. You did see a player come in and put a ceiling on it, but that ceiling is still a 4.7 million, which is like 2.5
billion. It's
billion
still too high
per month. That's a high ceiling, which means there's going to be a lot of disgruntled players in there, we think. And so CCP might react to that and say, we got to cool that off. Let's actually have a sale and knock that price down. So, but anyway, the point is, I wouldn't get into PLEX now. I would get into this other stuff that's starting to go up. If what Tuzy is saying, the stockpiles have run out, that means these big financiers that were suppressing the price can no longer suppress it. And so it's going to start climbing up. And so it's a really good time to get into the stuff that, has to do with moon goo. Because moon goo changed from a thing that you just passively mined to something that you actually have to put the effort into. And that changes the whole equation on labor, like actual physical human labor to get the thing that used to just kind of happen. And that's a big psychological change that's a psychological change to players that affects the actual quantity that actually gets mined. Okay. Sorry, we got to wrap it up. I love Market Talk too, but we got to go. I got to run. Thanks, Tuzy, for stopping by. It's always interesting when you're around.
Yeah, sure. I didn't see I didn't have Discord open. I didn't see that y'all were doing something, and I happened to glance at your Discord because I was going to troll Dunk Dinkle, and then I saw that y'all were in here.
Come do it live. Yeah, listen, I'm taking the next 2 weeks off. because my family's on vacation, so I'm going to be on vacation. And so these chill streams, this will be the last one for a little while. Sorry. I may surprise you guys, but there's nothing planned, so don't look for it. We do have a contest that we're running right now for winning an avatar. You can find details on that at talkingstations.com. And I don't know when we're going to present that prize anymore. We may actually present it Sunday, so don't delay if you're going to be a part of that. Do it now, because we may actually have the announcement on Sunday so that I can take the next 2 weeks off completely clean without having to come back and do that. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Artemis, for coming, and Seraph and Maccloud. Thank you, guys. We'll talk to you later. Thanks for hanging out. Bye.